And then they said, okay, based on this research now, we put you under a pilot program and go innovate institute. Go try things and fail quick and tell us what works and tell us what doesn't. And then based on what you learn, we'll roll that out to the world.
There have been so many businesses that I've gone into and they said, this is the way we do it. Why do you do it? Because this is what the rules say. And then I go take a look at the rules and I go, that's not actually what it says.
I want to help them connect with God and Jesus Christ. Now, if that's still my laser focused, I'll innovate, but I'm innovating with a target in mind, and that's going to keep me focused.
People come in and they're like, what are the parameters that I'm supposed to work within? Rarely do they ask the opposite question. Like, what are the needs that I'm trying to meet?
When you flip things upside down and rethink what preparation then looks like, you then learn.
Welcome to another episode of Teaching Restored, where we get to talk about how wonderful it is to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Kev. How's it going?
Fabulous. It's
good.
Very, very well.
It's a beautiful sunny day in Washington, which doesn't happen all that often.
Yes.
So I am in a great mood.
True. It's going to be really nice.
But I have to start today by sharing a little bit of a story.
Story-is.
So if anyone has listened to more than one episode of Teaching Restored, they probably know that I struggle with gospel teaching in my home. And I whine about it. Okay, I complain. Okay, I express my frustration frequently. It is a constant wrestle. It's tough. And I am a great, what's the word? I'm greatly motivated. I'm highly motivated to have really effective conversations in our house. So the other night we have our son who's getting ready for a mission sitting across the table, our daughter who is a freshman in high school, and her ADHD meds had totally worn off at this point. So I give her a little bit of grace. And we're trying to have a conversation about something, and it was going okay. And then all of a sudden she pops out with this comment, and I was tempted to react, but I will tell you I did not. She says to me, she's like, okay, I don't really get why we study the scriptures. Like, I know that we're supposed to, but it doesn't really make sense to me. And she said, it's history. Why don't we live more in the present? And I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought. Tell me a little bit more. And she started to express, first of all, it's really, really difficult for her to relate to the things that are in the scriptures. She has a tough time extrapolating the principles. And part of that is because she does have a learning disability. She has dyslexia and she struggles with the reading. And so, we've tried all these different things, but she says it's just really difficult to take this language that feels a little bit foreign, these experiences that feel a little bit foreign. She's like, I just feel like if we lived in the present more, I'd learn more. And again, I was very proud of myself for not reacting.
Well done.
But we had a really good conversation about it, because I feel so passionate about the scriptures, and I just want to give it to my kids, and we can't do that. So fast forward a couple of days, our guest today sends an email to us, and I had asked him a question and said, I would love to know what you're most passionate about as it relates to teaching. And he sent me back this quote by Adam Miller, who I absolutely love. And he said, this is Adam Miller, we need to find new ways to use old words to teach things that never change. And I'm like, that's it. So I would like to welcome Ryan Wilkins. Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
How are you guys?
Awesome. We're so good. And we're so excited to talk with you today. And the fact that, and if you take that quote and you kind of look at it a little bit, it was to me basically saying, let's figure out new, creative, innovative, fun ways to help people really connect with the scriptures, which is something clearly I feel passionately about. And I sometimes struggle with, especially within the walls of my own home. And so I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to that. And Ryan, we are super, super excited to talk with you today about how to do that. And we'd love to start by having you introduce a little bit about yourself. And then we've got lots to talk about.
Okay. I face the same struggles in my home. There's my introduction. I think sometimes it is so much easier to teach other people's teenagers and then I got my own, and I'm like, oh, this is trickier.
Yeah.
But I have 5 beautiful souls that I get to teach in my own home. My wife and I have children ranging from 23 to 12, which is
Oh,
interesting to teach different age groups in different ways at the
Mhm.
same dinner table or at the same
Mhm.
couch.
yep.
We currently live in St. George, Utah, where we play lots of pickleball and we hike and we love all
Fellow
things outdoors.
pickleballer.
Yes.
Pickleball.
Like
Julie.
pickleball court in the backyard. My wife just got back from a 10-day trip to China for pickleball. Like we're all
What?
in the black hole that is
We,
called pickleball.
how do we get hooked up with that?
God.
What?
Yeah, she's really, really good. Yeah, China.
Oh my gosh.
And,
Julie, guess what our next
Okay.
vacation is?
Pickleball would
We're going to
take you
China.
on. Yeah.
Okay. So hold on, Ryan. Hold on. I realize that this is not what this is about.
We'll get to the teaching stuff later. Let's
Right.
I know.
But pickleball.
Yes.
We have to talk about this for just one second because all I can picture in my mind is ping pong and how
Yeah.
fast that is in different countries in Asia. So I'm
Yes.
picturing that speed of pickleball if she's going to China.
Now you're thinking right, and what they were hoping is to continue to bring more people the same way ping pong took off in Asia, was to build some bridges and have people teach them a little bit more pickleball, because when they go all in, they go all in. And she would watch the way they're training already and the fast hands, and so it's going to spread like wildfire in Asia,
Wow.
the way that it started to do in the United States. And so we like it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we like you, and I want to meet your wife sometime because that's
It's the best.
rad.
That would be the better
That's so
interview.
cool. I'm so sorry. Okay, you may continue. Sorry, we just got
Okay.
you said pickleball. Kevin and I love it from an
Hey.
amateur place, but
In my teaching, pickleball seems to make its way in as the object lesson for all things gospel. So it's been nice to marry those two worlds.
As it should.
Yeah. Object lessons.
Appropriate.
That's a good fundamental of teaching.
Right.
I have taught. I taught seminary for 17 years in different seminaries around southern Utah, and then 7 years ago was invited to come to the St. George Institute, which is adjacent to Utah Tech, and I've been doing that for the last 7 years. And the really cool thing happened in my career. On the very first year that I came to the Institute, the leaders of seminaries and institutes, Chab Wed, who's the administrator over the entire program, he and his team came down from Salt Lake with a bunch of research from young adults throughout the world, LDS young adults, and especially those who were not attending Institute. And for 5 years, they had tried to pinpoint, like, why? What would Institute need to be to make it worth your time? And they gave us a stack of research, and they narrowed it down to kind of 3 things. And then they said, okay, based on this research, now we put you under a pilot program and go innovate Institute, go try things and fail quick and tell us what works and tell us what doesn't. And then based on what you learn, we'll roll that out to the world. And I was a brand new Institute teacher at that time. And so I kind of raised my hand and said, I will be the guinea pig. I will be the test person for anything and everything. And so we changed classroom setting. I grabbed a bunch of round tables and I went downstairs so I wouldn't get in other teachers' way. And so there was no front of the classroom. And they let me take off a tie and wear a polo shirt. And I was Ryan. I was no longer Brother Wilkins. And I had snacks that they could grab on the way in. And I said, I don't even know what course we're going to teach. And so give me all your gospel questions and let's build the foundation of our curriculum based on your questions and your needs and your desires. Wow. And so I just kind of went all in and said, let's figure out what innovate means and what it doesn't mean. And so that was 7 years ago. And over the last 7 years, I have, with the help of young adults and their questions and their concerns, I've created probably 15 different classes and been part of better conversations and deeper conversations and better gospel learning than my entire career. And I'm in love with it. And one of the innovative things we did was they let us start a podcast as part of our curriculum. And so me and another teacher, Marshall McConkey, we, for the last 2 years, have done a podcast called Gospel Chats. And we've tried to pattern it after some of these innovative courses, which is raw and real and unscripted and Christ-centered. And so that's me. That's what I do when I'm not playing pickleball.
Yeah. Important to note that. Yeah.
Those are my worlds: my family, my pickleball life, and teaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's a
In
good
that
life.
order? I love it. Just
The
kidding.
order gets shuffled. It depends on the day. If it's a Friday, the
It's
order
fair.
gets changed.
Totally appropriate. Okay,
Yeah.
so you said a couple of things in your introduction that I want to clarify and ask a question about. So you
Yep.
said you didn't list them. You said that there were three things that they learned from the research. What were
Yes.
those three things?
One was they want to feel deeply connected to God and Jesus Christ in relationship. If they go to classes and whatever the classes are, but they don't walk away feeling like they are more connected to God and Jesus Christ, it is not worth their time.
Mm.
They wanted it to be, number two was more relevant. Our questions. We want a space where we can ask our real questions and get real answers that are relevant to us. And the third thing was they wanted to feel a place of belonging. Um, wherever they're out in their faith journey, wherever they're at with social issues, wherever, that they could feel safe, that they could feel accepted and heard and seen, and that they belong. Those, and all the research they had done for 5 years, that's what they whittled it down to, was those three things. And so those became our three priorities. How do we create a space of belonging that feels very real and relevant and is absolutely connecting them in relationship with God and Jesus Christ?
Wow.
It's awesome. We're probably going to talk more about that. Let me ask my other clarifying question, because you mentioned something else that made me very, very curious. I don't expect you to list all of them, but you said that you've created 15 different classes that are built around the things that you heard from them. Can you just name a few of them? I'm curious what types of courses you ended up creating
Yeah.
in response.
The first one I ever created was Seeking Jesus Christ and His Joy.
Okay.
And that one led into Amazed and Changed by His Grace,
Oh,
navigating
last one's great.
faith. Yeah. Navigating faith, doubt, and questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That then led into creating one that I stole the title from Richard Osler in a podcast that he does, but Listen, Learn, Love. And that one
Okay.
was giving people more of a chance to be interviewed in front of a class based on, I'm inactive, I've faced addiction, I identify as LGBTQ plus. What about women in the church? What about racism? We addressed hard topics from the perspective of trying to listen, and that's how we're going. That the teaching was listening to people's stories.
That's great.
Yeah, so that was innovative. This has pushed me to do things and in ways that I've never done before, and it's taught me about teaching. You know, to do something professionally for 17 years, and you think you know what it is, and then to scrap all of it and to go back to the drawing board and
No
say,
kidding.
"Wow, maybe I actually have learned a lot of ineffective things that I thought were teaching because it's what we've done." And then you go
Right.
back with a blank whiteboard and say, no, what gets to people's hearts and helps them feel connected to Christ and belonging. And so, yeah, it pushed me. The infinite power of hope. We want to do a whole semester just on hope. What else have we done? Then I got to do a series on understanding the temple endowment. I'd sprinkled some things that fascinated me and them about the temple. They had lots of questions. That turned into an entire class now. That is probably my biggest class that I teach from semester to semester about the temple endowment. We did a class called Welcome to the Church of Joy. Stole that from Elder Kieran after his
Mm-hmm.
talk and said, if we need to talk about that for an entire semester, that was so good. And so that became a class. What else have I done? There's a few.
Man.
And I've talked
been so
about,
fun.
we've talked about blowing things up. And this is kind of like the ultimate blow up institute, start from scratch, start all over, forget the traditions of the past, forget what we've done, what is needed today, and focus on that. I love that.
I know. I think it's awesome.
One of
Okay.
the team members from Salt Lake, sorry, just to
No, say
piggyback on
it.
what Kevin just said, we had this whole research team that came down from Salt Lake, and they had gone to businesses, not the church businesses, just other businesses,
Mm.
trying to understand innovation. And he said that one of his biggest takeaways was for an organization to truly innovate something, you have to make like worldview shifting changes. Organizations make changes all the time, and they think they're big to them, but they're not big to the audience. And unless it's like a blow it up kind of change, your audience is not going to even realize that you changed and innovated something. And he pushed me on that. And so that it kind of wrecked my world in a beautiful way, because at first I thought, oh, we could tweak this or tweak that. And he kept
Yeah.
looking at me saying, you think that's a big change because you live in this world, you breathe this. And so you think you're making big changes. Your students are not going to realize that you're changing anything. Like if they're really going to notice it, you have to flip it upside down, blow it up kind of change.
Wow.
And so I thought, how do you do that and still teach the same gospel that is eternally true? Right? You can't
Right.
change the heart of what we do as far as the core gospel. But if that's the only thing that doesn't change and you could change everything else, what did that look like?
Oh my gosh. Like I'm thinking about, so you have somebody in Sunday school, somebody in primary, somebody in um, seminary, just like you're describing. And I'm thinking, how do they do that without feeling the weight of the parameters that are placed upon them? Like, I mean, I'm going to be honest. First of all, those three needs that you identified, I think would apply to every single one of those spaces, right? And
Yes.
so here we have I'm going to call it something that I shouldn't. I feel a little bit like I'm going to phrase this in a bad way. So please know that I mean this with the utmost respect, but we have the weight of the handbook on our shoulders. Like people come in and they're like, what are the parameters that I'm supposed to work within? Rarely do they ask the opposite question. Like, what are the needs that I'm trying to meet? Which is the opposite of what are the parameters that I should be working within? Like, if you're trying to meet needs, you don't have parameters. Like, you got to figure it out. So, how do we do something
So
like that?
hold on a second. Hold on. I want to add something in here, Julie, because I
Yeah.
totally get that. There have been so many businesses that I've gone into and they said, this is the way we do it. Why do you do it? Because this is what the rules say. And then I go take a look at the rules and I go, that's not actually what it says. What it says is this. Now if you just take that as a blanket, as its own thing, really, then there's a lot of different things we can do. But I think we interpret those things in the handbook to mean something. When
That
if
they
we
don't.
looked at it differently, we could totally reinterpret it though, right?
I would agree completely. And so I think, and so to your point, Kevin, and I actually, so sorry, I don't mean to monologue for a second, but just last night, I have a communications calling right now in the stake. And just last night, we were trying to make a decision about an event that's coming up. And this is going to sound crazy, but whether or not to pray at the beginning of the event. And, it's a church event. And the woman that I was talking to, she's like, well, of course we pray. And I'm like, do we? And she's like, oh, okay, wait a minute. I'm not sure. And so she's going to go counsel with this group that she needs to counsel with to make that decision. But I said, you've got to ask the question with intent. Like the decisions that we make, we have to make intentionally, not just by default, because we're used to doing it that way. So what would you say to someone in a teaching calling who's thinking about parameters, whether they're self-imposed because of their perceptions or actually there? How do they do this? Like, how did you start? You obviously had all parameters removed, but like,
Not
what
all.
advice?
Not all. So
Okay.
that was the tricky thing to do, exactly what Kevin was saying there, to say, okay, have I built some parameters culturally that are not really the
Yes.
parameters? And so let's go back and get super clear on what are the parameters. And then to feel so trusted that to say, because I was trusted, I wanted to be trustworthy. And so I thought, okay, my job is to get very clear on what the parameters are, because I want to be a trustworthy employee, teacher of the gospel, where they could give enough leeway to say, we're going to give him some rope and he's not going to hang himself or corrupt our students.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to
Right.
be trustworthy enough to say, no, I am 100% clear on what the objective is and what the parameters are. But then once you're clear on that, then you're freed up to ask the next set of questions to say, okay, now that I am clear on what they are and what they are not, now that box actually got a lot bigger. There's still a box. There's still some boundaries that are just not appropriate or not
Right.
needed or
For sure.
not helpful. But the minute you start asking that question to say, is that really a real parameter? Is that just a cultural, self-imposed, whatever? Now you realize, okay, the box got a lot bigger. And if it got that much bigger, what would we fill it with?
Mm-hmm.
And what could we fill it with that we didn't even realize we could fill it with? And then the inspiration and the counseling and the ideas just start to flow. And a lot of it's kind of trial and error. I've learned a lot with innovation, that innovating for the sake of innovation can become addicting, and you could
Yeah.
start to lose focus on the real objective. Now it's kind of like, I have freedom, so I'm going to use freedom, versus, no, I'm laser focused on, I want to help them connect with God and Jesus Christ. Now, if that's still my laser focused, I'll innovate, but I'm innovating with a target in mind, and that's going to keep me focused.
Yeah.
Well said. That
So
makes a ton of sense.
let me give you this little experience that I've had, and I want to get your take on how you've done this. When trying to strip away those cultural things or the things, and the way I see it a lot of times is that we make decisions on assumptions, and we need to go back and reevaluate the assumptions on which we base those decisions. Are we going to pray at the beginning? Yeah, we are, because we always do, right? Well, that's just a given. We assume that's going to happen, but then we have to go back and reassess that assumption. One of the tools I've used is asking why, and it seems really simple, but saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Well, why are you going to do that? Well, because of this. Well, why is that? Because of this. Well, why is that? And that gets
Sound like a
back to
4-year-old.
yeah. But it gets back to the core of, why are you actually doing something? And sometimes it's like that because we've always done it, or the handbook. Well, what does the handbook really say? Actually, the handbook says this, or whatever it is. So that's one way I've done it though. How have you been able to strip back some of those and help others do the same? Because you're going through it yourself, but then for you to actually do these things, you've got to have other people on board that are okay with stripping that away as well. And that sometimes can be difficult also.
Yeah. Yeah. It does take a lot of stripping down. I mean, that's just the best way I've described what I had to do mentally, and what then I've tried to help other teachers here to do. And for me, I don't know, my brain works this way. And it's the why question is the driving thing behind it with me too.
Okay.
I think about it as reverse engineering. I think so often I approach teaching from a forward motion of, I'm going to teach them this to lead them to here, to lead them to B, to C, and hopefully we'll get to Z. And the minute I flipped it and said, let me start at the end to say, if someone walked out of my class by the very end on Z, what would I hope that they were thinking or feeling or experiencing? Going back to those three things, are they connected with God now? Did they feel like they were belonging? Was it relevant? Did they get a chance to ask their real questions? If I start there and I reverse engineer it backwards and say, what really helps that to happen? How do I feel that really? Like, when do I really felt like I belong? When did I really feel like I connected with Jesus Christ in some sort of classroom setting? And so now I'm reverse engineering it backward to think through, like, how does that really happen? And then to get back to the start to say, I don't need 10 of these things that we've always done. Those honestly never really helped me get to those outcomes. So I'm going to scrap those, which gives me a lot more room to play around with some other things that I really do love this. And I've never seen it in a teaching setting, but in my car, this helps me feel connected to God. So maybe I bring the car into my classroom and I bring in some Christian music. And I love people's stories. Typically, I'm the teacher, so I think my job's to teach, but wait a minute. If I feel connected through God by hearing people's stories, maybe I invite some people into my classroom and I shut up as a teacher and I just let them share their story and we ask them questions. Maybe the outcome is better by doing things that I've never done in my classroom before because I was too filled with A, B, C, D. But the minute I started with Z and worked backwards, then I could start to decide what needs to stay, I don't know. Does that make sense? That's how my brain works, is I reverse
I
engineer
love
it.
that. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so with that, as you're going through this process, one of the other lines that you dropped in your introduction that I almost missed, and so I hope I'm quoting this correctly, is that one of the instructions you received was to fail quick. And so I imagine that in your reverse engineering, you learned a lot and you probably botched it sometimes. I'd love
Yeah,
to know what kinds of failures you had in that process and what you learned from it. What are some of the things that you botched?
that's good.
Is that fair?
Yeah, that's very fair. I'll tell. So two come instantly to mind. One in the very first class, because I was, again, okay, I want to change everything, and then we'll see what sticks, what mattered, what didn't matter, what made a difference, what got them to Z. And so as I was really focused on them teaching each other, I wanted them to feel connected. I wanted them to, again, the idea of no front of the classroom. We're teaching each other, we're discussing it. This is less of a lesson and more of a conversation, a focused conversation, but a conversation. And I had one student at the end of the semester say, Brother Wilkins, I can tell what you're trying to do, and I think there's a lot of good in this. But I come to the Institute because I want doctrine, and I want doctrine from someone who has paid a price to understand some things that I don't yet understand. And I had to kind of sit with that and say, okay, I don't think what he's saying is that I need to go back to being a talking head and say, I'm smart, I'm the Institute teacher, let me pour it into your brain. But I do need to insert myself at the right places to use, like, there's a reason we have a teacher. And there's
Yeah.
and to find this middle ground to say the conversation and the wrestling together, we need to do more in Sunday school, elders quorum, Relief Society. It needs to be less talking head. But the teacher, if they're wise, so I failed on maybe going too far and like taking myself out of the experience, and I was just kind of the cheerleader and let me set you up with this experience and let me set you up with this conversation, and that little bit of feedback really pushed me to say no. I still need to talk, but I need to find the right moments and to say the right things. When could I really add the right thing at the right moment? So that was one, failing
That's
fast,
great.
and that's still a journey. The second one that came to mind is in that Listen, Learn, Love class. I would invite people to come, and I told them real, raw, unscripted. That's really good, and it was really needed, and that gets really scary.
Yeah, I could see that.
You know,
Yes.
you give people a mic and you talk about a topic that could be very heated. And so I've learned, and I'm trying to think, like, if I were to summarize, I've learned a lot from that class. But again, I learned that I maybe went so far the one way that I had to balance it out with, I needed to give some parameters to them. Not,
Okay.
not too much, not to box them in, but to stay focused on our objective of seminaries and institutes, which is conversion to Jesus Christ. Because it almost felt like in some of those conversations, we focused on the second great commandment at the expense of the first great commandment, right? We were trying to create a lot of love for neighbor,
Sure.
and we had almost divorced it from love for God. And so to just learn that and to say, no, there's a way that we can do both of these at the same time, if I will give them a little bit of focus on the questions I ask, or even just a heads up before. You guys know with an interview, it's good to do some prep on saying, hey, just a couple little cautions. And then you avoid some fires that you had to put out in the middle of conversations. So
Right.
there's two that first pop into my mind of things I failed fast.
Those are very good.
Yeah, those are both great.
Julie, if I'm putting on my gospel teacher hat, if I have a calling in gospel teaching, so far in the last 25 minutes or so, I've just learned a lot of different things that I can totally change and rethink and have almost an epiphany of, wait, maybe. I mean, just take the one idea of that interview, the Learn, Listen, Love. Is that right? Learn, Listen, Love. Yeah.
Listen, learn, love.
Listen, learn, love.
Listen, learn, love. Just using that maybe every now and then in a gospel teaching somehow, and getting raw and real about things. Wow, that could really make some waves, good and bad.
Right. Right.
Fail fast and change lives, and just try to err more on the one side than the other.
Yeah.
Well, and it was interesting, like the cautions that you gave and the things that you learned from failure, I thought were really insightful as well, because I think that sometimes, the overarching caution there is that you can go too far in one direction and you have to go back to and remember what your focus and objectives are. And I
Absolutely.
think that that's really, really good counsel.
So
Go ahead, Ken.
let me ask this question. Sorry, real quickly. So you mentioned a number of times how you went a little bit too far and you kind of scaled back. Would it be not particularly correct, but almost good in saying that maybe we can try some things enough to where we get our hand slapped a little bit and then come back a little bit? And just like, whether it's from God or from the bishop or whomever, like, oh yeah, okay, I stepped over a little bit, but okay, I learned a little bit, and then okay, now I reform. I don't know. I have that picture in my head a little.
I have too, and I've wondered the appropriate way to say it in the church, because it can feel dangerous, even just hearing that. Like if I'm got my bishop's hat on for a second, and all my teachers are thinking my job is to go far enough where I can at least get my hand slapped. It could be like, well, I don't know if that's exactly the way I'd say it, but if I'm to be honest, from where I've been as a teacher, that's exactly where I think the position that they put me in. The research team was saying, if you have not had to course correct, if you have not had to peel back, you haven't tried hard enough. You haven't thought innovative enough. And so again, the hand slaps, what the right terminology is. I think all of us as teachers, if we have not had to really go back and question, is this okay? Then we probably haven't pushed it far enough. So yeah, I think, and I'm guilty of that. And until I had a group come in and push me further, it's that whole idea of if you have not flipped it upside down, they're not going to notice the change. And so if I keep thinking I'm making changes, we make these slight little tweaks. I don't know, in an ongoing restoration with prophets, seers, and revelators who, my experience over the last 10 years in the church is there's been changes that have not been slight little tweaks.
Right.
They've been innovative, revolutionary, flips things upside down, where it's like, I didn't even know we could do that. I didn't know we could combine those quorums. I didn't know we could change that age. I didn't know they could be witnesses. And so again, if prophets, seers, and revelators are asking those questions, they're going back to scripture and saying, could women be Sunday school president? That you don't get that answer unless you ask a question that people have not been asking.
Totally. I love
but
that.
Completely appropriate too. Again, so the hand slapping that, so you can get weird with that and you can go way outside of bounds. But yeah.
Well, maybe we just say, if you haven't pushed hard enough that you failed, then you're playing it too safe. And maybe it doesn't require a hand slap, but like you got to push to the point of failure sometimes, because failure is where you learn.
Yeah. And I guess for me, I would say even to failure, we better be pushing into being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to pivot us just a tiny bit. Did you want to say something else on this, Kev, or can I pivot us a little bit?
Pivot on.
Okay. So there was something that you said in our email exchange that really stuck out to me. And you talked about how there are certain aspects of the gospel, and you were talking about the temple in particular, that people want to love, but they struggle to love it because they don't really understand it. So we're talking a little bit about the inaccessibility, or this feeling that certain things are inaccessible to us. And that's kind of a feeling sometimes I think that people approach certain topics with, like, I want to love it, but like, there's no way I can really understand, everything that's going on in the gospel or in the temple. And, specifically, I sometimes am intimidated by the phrase that it's received by revelation and best understood by revelation, because I'm like, I am not always great at receiving revelation. And so it's intimidating. So this is kind of a two-part question, and you can approach it however you want, but I'd love to talk about ways that we make certain aspects of the gospel feel inaccessible, like some of the teaching things that we do that are making it feel inaccessible, and then some of the ways that you bridge that gap between I want to love it, but I don't get it. And so, how do you make it feel more accessible by helping them bridge that gap? Does that question make sense, or did I?
No, yeah, it makes sense. I'm just thinking through
Okay.
that. Yeah, so if we took the temple as an example of that, um, for me, I'm trying to keep up with prophets, seers, and revelators because I think they have helped break down what we thought was inaccessible.
Yeah.
Here's a game changer for me. 2019, I think it was Elder Bednar's talk, Be Prepared in All Things. That's not the exact title, I don't think, but he told us about the best place for temple preparation is in our homes. And I think
Yeah.
anyone who was listening to that as a parent probably felt their knees buckle a little bit and thought, oh no, come on. Like I need the church for that one because out of all the things, I don't know how to do that because temple prep in our homes to that point would be don't try to remember everything, just pay attention to how you feel. That was our temple prep coming from the home
Yep.
and the church. So
Yep.
we actually went one step further in the church and we had this is going to be bad, but maybe I'll get my hand slapped, but that's okay. Kevin said that I need to go that far.
Yep.
That I mean, we had temple preparation courses where we went one step further than pay attention to how you feel. And we reviewed primary. And we said, okay, so
Yeah.
here's the plan of salvation. And there's this thing called symbolism. And you're going to run into it in the temple. And we make covenants because they're important. Now, good luck. Now go in there for 2 hours and they're going to flip your world upside down. And you should have totally been prepared and fallen in love with it.
Oh my
So,
gosh, that's so awesome.
okay, so we come
That's
out
so
of that
awesome.
world. We come out of that world, and now Elder Bednar says that our homes are the best place for temple preparation. But by the end of his talk, he said, as soon as my talk is done, you can go to the church website and go to temples.churchofjesuschrist.org, and there will be a bunch of resources. And so to now say, so culturally, I just think that we, sometimes because we don't pay attention, sometimes because we're lazy, sometimes just our ignorance, whatever, we don't go to the resources that are out there to bring us into understanding. And the church, better than ever, is giving us resources. I mean, you even think what we're doing right now between all that's church approved straight from the church, but then all the additional podcasts and books and education weeks. And I mean, there are resources out there. So I think a lot of it, some of it's been the church, and we've had to play catch up with breaking down some walls and saying we can talk about things like the temple better than we do. But then I think it's on us. A lot of it's on us to just say, if I don't understand something, there's probably resources out there that I can go get. I just need to be more of a diligent learner. So I think it kind of comes from both ends, but I don't know if there's a more there's probably a better answer to that. But for me, if we would, I think we're getting better as a church, and I need to follow my leaders because they're trying to give us better resources. But I need to be motivated to go get the resources that are available.
That makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Kev. Sorry.
A lot of times we don't know that the resources are there, however. And I think that's, as you described that, I'm like, yeah, if you look on the Gospel Library app, there is a ton there. If you look on the website, there's a ton there. But I think that as we go into a new phase of life, like Julie is having her first, just went through the temple for the first time. And as a parent dealing with that for the first time, how would you even know to look there? And you start going off of your own intuition of what you think you might want to teach them, not realizing the resources. Although Elder Bednar in 2019 said that they're there, but we're going to forget that by then, by that point that we need it. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like we need to dive into Gospel Library app often and the church website often, just to know what's there and just to remind us.
Pushing us there more. And what they've shared with us in the Seminary and Institute side is that topics and questions folder, that out of all the ones we should be checking, that I think has become their landing spot to connect us then with all the other sources.
Gotcha.
So that we don't need to know how to find 10. If I can go to the one place, find the topic on endowment, and now the links. And so now they've got a short, digestible, here's a summary, but here's all the links for those of you who now want to teach your child, understand yourself. And so I think they're trying to help us to say, we get it. You don't know where to find the 10. we'll give you 1. If you'll just continue to go back to the 1, we'll link you into the other 10.
That's great. Thank you.
Well, and I think, like, as you're talking about this, one of the things that it used to, what I hear you saying is that it used to legitimately be inaccessible, but now we don't have that excuse anymore. Like, there is so much information out there. But I think that as teachers, we still make certain topics feel like, and let's be specific, emotionally almost or spiritually inaccessible. Like they are in the mysteries of God category. Like you're not really going to understand. In fact, I think we even say out loud as parents and otherwise, when it comes to the temple, you're not really going to understand it, but just keep going and you can keep asking questions and stuff like that. And I think we have to be a little bit cautious of that too, that we almost put parameters on people's learning by the way that we talk about the subjects in our classrooms or in our conversations, that we need to be more like, I love what you said at the beginning when you're talking about, this wasn't on the podcast. Sorry, this was in our conversation before, where you were talking about how you and Brother McConkey sit down together and you talk about things that you don't necessarily understand and that you're wrestling with, but you take them to each other and you go wrestle in that type of a conversation. And what I hear you saying is that part of what you're trying to do in the classroom is create space for that. And so the things that feel inaccessible, instead of just saying, you're not really going to get it, it's totally okay, it's very symbolic, blah, 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 and writing it off, which I think we are guilty of doing sometimes, we invite them into a space where we're like, no, you want to understand it? Like, go on the journey, man. You may hit a point where, go ahead. Yeah.
I agree. And let's go on the journey together. I had a
Right?
teacher say that it was one of the greatest compliments that I had received. And he's a dear friend. We've taught together for years. And I was in his building the other day teaching some of his seminary students. And he grabbed me just after and said, I love that you are on the same level there with the students. And he went on and kind of explained that, they're 16 and 17, but it didn't feel like you were talking at them. You were just having a conversation with them. And so what I've had to learn over years, and I have to keep relearning because I forget it, is I can break down a lot of those emotional barriers if I'll start lessons with real questions of my own. For example, okay, sometimes I'll go through a temple ordinance and this could feel weird or unapproachable. Can we go look at some of these verses that are in scripture of the priests at the tabernacle? Why were they washed in water? Can we just sit in that together? Because I have questions about the initiatories. And now we go look at this perspective of, I'm not here to teach you why they do what they do, either culturally or whatever. I just want to go look at something and say, does anyone else not understand this? Let me let down my guard and tell you what I don't understand or what I wrestle with. So it doesn't feel like I'm here now to teach you this. You know what I mean? Just the way that you frame something as a journey together versus I'm going to show you how to do this. Yes. And the minute you do that, now we can go look at things that are completely accessible. There are washings, there are anointings, there are veils, there are covenants there. And so now you get to go lean into that as a fellow searcher, but yeah, the more vulnerable I am, the more I share what I don't understand or what I wish I knew, or, but I've had to strip down some pride of saying, I'm not going to be the teacher who knows everything. I'm just going to be a fellow student who has more questions than I have answers. And to not fake that, to not just say that because I heard it on a podcast and that was the right way to do it, but because I'm genuine about I'm so curious to just learn with you together today. So I've got some questions. I don't know if I have answers, but let's go look at the right questions and then to go. So yeah.
That's
something
awesome.
Like that.
Are there questions that they have that surprise you? Like you talked about how at the very beginning, I guess that part of what I'm asking in this question is, you might have questions. You've studied the gospel for years. You've gone deeper than a lot of people in your preparation to become an instructor. And so your questions are going to be a little bit different from their questions, maybe, right? And
Yes.
So how do you kind of marry the two so that you are asking questions that they will relate to?
Yeah. I have fallen in love. I can't teach a class at this point without finding out what their questions are at the start.
Yeah.
I've done that for way too many years, and I think I have answered way too many questions that were not being asked. And
Mm.
so to, again, reverse engineer it and say, if the point of this is for us to get answers in Revelation, I need to know where you're at. And
Hmm.
so there's a lot of, I'll start with, if we have a given topic of, I'm just trying to think, I did one just recently on patriarchal blessings. And
Hmm.
instead of assuming I knew what the questions are or what principles I needed to teach, I invited them just through a text real quick that I could throw up on the screen. What questions do you have when you think about really using our patriarchal blessings as a gift? And then they start to share their questions. And now I think that scares a lot of teachers, because then they think like, what do I do with that? What if I don't have all
Right.
the answers to their questions? That's not why I'm inviting them to ask their questions, is so that I can now answer every one of them. But just knowing what their questions are leads us back into a conversation where we're going to study doctrine, we're going to study quotes and scriptures, but just knowing what their questions are, I think we start to find answers now together, and I'm not the one who's giving them. And so that's one thing I had to learn is I thought, man, if I'm going to ask their questions, I got to be ready to have answers to everything out there. That's not true. Just
Mhm.
finding out their questions will change the journey, and then God and Revelation will hopefully, and other students and a little bit of everything, Revelation is scattered among us. We'll start to find answers that way. So I think we need to ask people what their questions are a lot more and a lot sooner. Before,
Mhm.
do you guys remember this one liner from Elder Bednar? I know he said it multiple times. He said, talking and telling is not teaching. To teach,
Yes.
we first need to listen, observe, and discern, and then we'll know what to say.
I was about to bring that up. Yep, exactly. Yeah.
That I've
Yes.
spent, I don't know
Every
how
time.
many hours and weeks and months I have spent trying to figure out, what does that really mean? What does that really look like? But I think that's a little piece to the puzzle, is asking their questions sooner in real ways. And then me letting down my guard and coming with questions instead of answers.
But that's a real mind shift in how we teach. Instead of saying, I've got the answers, here you go, you're
Yeah.
figuring out the answers together of questions that they come up with, not the questions that you can. I mean, those two things right there, for a typical teacher to try to change that, I could see be pretty difficult, but kind of necessary, at least as far as I am concerned.
Blow it up, flip it upside down, do
Yes.
things that I thought I knew what I was doing. I did this every day for 17 years in a row. And then all of a sudden to be like, wait a minute, what if I did it absolutely backwards?
I
And how do
love
I
it.
still take some of the good of what I've done for 17 years? Right, there's
Yeah.
good in there and some of it, but it's a very different mindset, like actually almost backwards of, wait, my job is to help us as a group get to the right questions. If we're asking the right questions, the answers will come.
The back at the beginning of the church, from what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I saw from reading different sources is that it was not unusual for someone in the church to get up and preach for 2 or 3 hours themselves, and everyone sit there and listen, right? That happened over, and I've read that so many times. And I wonder what it would have been like to say, you know what, you've been preaching for 3 hours. We want you to bring that down to a half an hour. They're like, whoa, I don't know if I can bring that down. That's going to be too tough. And that's almost kind of what we're being asked to do here, is we need to rethink that. It's not the same as it always has been.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if you're a teacher, you've reverse engineered it, you start with questions. Tell me a little bit about, just because I want to get to the nuts and bolts. I'm thinking about a type A personality teacher who is listening to this and they're like, well, then how do I prep? So what counsel would you give them besides, I mean, you did say come up with your own questions, bring those authentic questions, but like you got to have some meat in the conversation. So what advice would you give to them about the process for preparing?
Here's another one line. Everything good in my life I stole from somebody. So this came from, we were both getting our master's degree at BYU, and we're walking across campus and we're having this teaching conversation. And he says, Ryan, I think I'm finally understanding that it's not about preparing a lesson. It's about being prepared for the lesson. And he and I
Awesome.
just sat in that, and it sounds so simple in some ways, but it's another game changer. It's a flip it upside down.
Good point.
And so when I'm preparing, it's less about, okay, now we're going to read this verse and I'm going to ask this question so that we can get to this quote so that I can teach my lesson. It's much more, I've got this chapter. What do I love and hear about Christ? What am I learning? And what are some of the questions? And so now I'm just going through the process of just being a learner. I just want to find Christ. I want to find connection with God. I want to find answers to my questions. And now that I've gone through that, if that was the only preparation I did, I should be prepared to have a magnificent experience for 30 minutes with a group of people. Because if the only thing I did was to say, I don't know, I started with this question and then I started looking at this. So let's just go look at these verses together. Tell me your thoughts. What do you love? What stands out to you? And now they're sharing, and I could then jump in and add my 2 cents. That stood out to me too. Or no, I saw something different and it led me to here. So what connections do you see between these two things? And then they start sharing and I say, here's one connection I made. And it made me then think about my home and what's going on with my daughter right now. We're in this conversation. I didn't prepare which verses we're going to read, when, in which order, but I did own and have an experience with the lesson, right? With the block of scripture or the topic. And again, that's still for a type A personality could sound daunting and scary. It is so magnificent to not be so scripted that you have to rely on God.
Mm-hmm.
It is so easy to teach enough and that you don't even notice that you're doing it, but you don't really have to rely on that extra faith and pleading prayer as the teacher because you've got it scripted out. I know how this is going to go and I'm going to drive this ship. As opposed to I'm Peter, I'm getting out of the boat and I'm going to put my feet on water that's a lot less stable than this boat. You are praying in your heart and soul as a teacher for inspiration on what to say next. And lo and behold, miracles happen so much better in that scenario than the scripted version.
And I agree with you 1,000%. And to all of those who are freaking out in their hearts, maybe step into the zone of like discomfort that you recommended people go into, right? And just try it once. It's such a, what I hear you saying basically is have your own experience. That's your preparation. Have your own experience with the content first. And you don't have to have 17 years of studying the gospel. In fact, some of the best teachers are people who are looking at it with fresh eyes because they are just coming back to church or a new convert to the church. And I love the different words that people use and the insights that come from that. And so embrace all of that insecurity and have your own experience with it. And I think you'll have a better, like you're thinking about, you would never script a lesson if you were going to go to lunch with your friend who had a question about the gospel. You'd go study what it was that you were going to be talking about. And then you'd go have a real conversation.
And I think you'd want to do two things. You would be super excited to share what you loved and had discovered. And you would be super curious to ask them questions, what they loved and discovered. And that would make a fabulous conversation for an hour.
There you go.
What did you love? How do you see it? What do you say? Here's what I loved. Here's what I'm seeing. And in that conversation, we would come out both with more questions and more answers.
Yes.
Two things.
And more hungry and more excited. And
I can't wait for next week when we're going to eat lunch because you're going to go study some things and I'm going to go study some things and I'm going to be super excited to share some things, but I'm going to come with real hard questions too. And I know that you're going to share what you loved and you're going to ask me some questions that I don't know the answer to originally, but somewhere in the middle of the messy wrestle, we're going to walk away saying, that was awesome. I had no idea that that's where our lunch conversation was going to go. And I'm so glad that I didn't know where our lunch conversation was going to go.
Amen. It's so funny because I'm sitting here and I'm like, sometimes we'll interview people and I'm all, man, I wish I could go be in their class. Like I would love to come sit in one of these classes.
St. George.
Come hang out with me.
I'm especially in the listen, learn, love one. Like that's one that seems so, so cool to me. I absolutely love it.
Just take that one. So I'll tell you what it did for me in an institute setting, but now how I think I would see it spilling over into other church settings. So I learned to pull back a little bit to make sure that we were focused on the objective of Jesus Christ. And so the next semester I did a class on repentance. And there's a million things that I would love to share and teach about repentance. And instead, I had a buddy who he's involved with the 12-step program. And I was so enamored with this idea of now hearing people's stories. And the more he and I started to talk, I had him give me 12 names of different people who had gone through the 12-step program. And I would invite one of them to come in to address step one. And they would share some of their story and how step one had led them closer to true repentance. That would be half the class. Then my students would ask questions. Then, after I had heard all of that, as I'd listened, observed, and discerned both the stories and the questions, I would try to add 20 minutes of then conversation on some quotes and some scriptures in my own, wherever I thought the conversation could go there. So I kind of married a whole bunch of things together. Oh my goodness. You get 12 different people coming in and sharing real, raw, like change your life repentance nuggets, giving students an opportunity now to ask their questions, and me then trying to come in with my experience or, with the gospel to say, okay, now I've got 2 or 3 more questions to push wherever the conversation. I didn't know what questions I needed to ask before the conversation. You couldn't come up with them until you were in it.
Right.
And so that's what it kind of looks like, all coming together for me is something like that. So that course kind of married 3 of those things that we've been talking about. So why couldn't that be Sunday school? Why couldn't that be and not every class? Not every class, but again, think outside the box. Is that within the parameters? Who's ever asked that question? Could I bring it? This isn't a 5th Sunday. We don't invite guest speakers into 4th Sunday, right? But could we? Is there anything about the handbook that doesn't say, no, I would invite so-and-so to come spend the first 10 minutes sharing their story, and then invite our Sunday school class to ask them questions. And then we use the next 10 minutes to dive into our block of whatever the talk was that we were assigned for Elders Quorum, and to say, wow, do you see how beautifully that all resonates? And it doesn't have to go in that order. But again, that package, sign me up for Elders Quorum. I would go to that Elders Quorum. I would be excited for that Elders Quorum.
I love that. So just think of this. I can hear just in my mind, so many teachers are saying, but that's not the way we teach. That's not what we've done. Right. And it is there. You just blew something else up again, and a new way of doing it, a new way of possibly teaching. And again, it's the preparation that you're talking about. You're preparing yourself to have this discussion. You're preparing them, and then it's raw and authentic. And boy, I love that idea to bring that in.
Okay.
Yes,
so
Julie.
I have to just add one thing. I know that this is maybe going too deep on one little thing, but it's fascinating to me. So when you're talking about this listen, learn, love, I have to make the point that I think that part of the beauty of it is that you are, without even teaching it, you are teaching people empathy. You're teaching them how to truly listen, knowing somebody else has a different experience than they have, which is a skill that leads us back to the example of Jesus Christ, right? That's something that you're giving them the opportunity to practice. But I imagine you have to prep them for that just a little bit. And so I know that this isn't the topic, but I just want to ask, what type of prep did you do with the students to be able to do that, so that they weren't inserting their opinions? They weren't, sharing their autobiography. They weren't being disrespectful, or, I don't know how to ask this, but let me tell you just really fast the reason I'm asking this question. So we had a class once and it was a 5th Sunday, so I had both Elders Quorum and Relief Society, and I brought in people who had different beliefs from different churches and had them come and stand at the front, and I had each one of them share a statement of their belief. But then the responsibility of everybody there was to literally repeat back what they heard them say. And they couldn't do it. That's all I wanted them to do, is I wanted them to just repeat back what they heard. And so I had to, and the skill was this was the point of the lesson, was to teach the skill of empathy by breaking it down into talking about what mirroring looks like, rephrasing content, etc. But they couldn't do it. And so we had, I mean, by the end, they were doing way better. By the fifth person, they had it down, but they wanted so badly to insert their opinions. So that's why I'm asking the question. I'd love
Yeah.
to know what kind of prep you did for that.
It's interesting, this whole idea, when you flip things upside down and rethink what preparation then looks like, you then learn there's 3 different preparations that I would have to do for a class like that. One, I would have to own the topic for myself, just so I understood the doctrine, understood the scriptures, understand the prophetic quotes. 2, I would have to prep the person who was going to share. That so that they were focused, and that prep looked like, this is our objective. Now, I want you to feel free. I want you, this is real. So don't feel like you can't say, if you struggle with something, if you want to be honest about something. Now, what I need you to understand, though, that this is our objective, right? And so you're kind of just having this conversation of like, I want to give you room to spread your wings, but this is this direction. And so there's some prep that would go on there and to figure out what that looked like. And then the third piece would be to talk to my students and to say, now your job is to listen and ask really good questions. Now, let me give you some examples of the kind of questions that I mean by really good questions. This is not for your own curiosity, and this is not to debate, and this is not to pick apart whatever. I've invited this person in as a guest, and I want them to feel super safe that they can share whatever. Now, if I need to clarify anything as a teacher, I will take care of that. That's my job. It's not theirs. It's not yours. So here's what I need you to be looking for as students. What is a question that you could ask this person who is sharing that would invite more revelation into your life? That would invite you to understand how you could come closer to Jesus Christ. Those are the questions you need to be thinking about as they share their story. And that was all learning curve. I didn't do that stuff at the start. At first, I'm just like, hey, here's the mic, go. And then I'm like, oh, wait.
Right.
I did my personal preparation, but I didn't prep the sharer, the speaker. And so that was level 2. I'm like, now I learned that I need to prepare them. And then some of the questions would come up and you're like, no, what are you doing? And so then I realized, no, there's a third level to preparation. I need to prepare my students to ask the right kind of questions. So that's been a learning curve. And it's gotten better. It's so much better. The little things that you can do as a teacher. And again, this is teaching. And it's a new way to think about teaching. We don't think about teaching as preparing students to ask better questions. We just hope they will, and then we fill space when they don't, and we just keep doing it the way we always have. But so preparing to be a teacher is a different skill set than we thought it was.
Awesome.
I love
That's
this.
so great. And I love that you said that part of what you did is you messed up. I think people just need to be trying stuff, right?
Right.
I am the poster child for failing fast, but I think around the way, and I haven't driven too many people away from the church completely. I've had some conversations in my office with important people, and then we keep moving forward.
It's amazing. You objective of failing quick, accomplished. High five to
There you go.
No, I think we learn a lot from that. And I think people need to not be afraid to make little tweaks. This process of learning how to teach is a line upon line process, just like anything else.
Yeah.
Sure
And we got to try things. We got to do things we've never done before. How are we going to get to places we haven't been if we haven't done things we haven't done?
Isn't that Dr. Seuss
So
or
true.
something?
Probably. Like I said, any good thing
Or a
can steal
prophet.
it from someone.
Okay, good point.
Yeah, they're close to each other. Okay.
Yeah.
So in wrapping up, we talked about so many different things. And I honestly, I think this, as people watch and listen to this, I honestly think this is probably one of the more impactful episodes that we've had if we just learn to think differently than we've been doing all along. I mean, I can't tell you how many times kids come out of class and they say, well, that was boring again, just because we're doing the same old thing. And no, we want to have an experience that draws them closer to Jesus Christ. So in wrapping up, out of everything that we said, what would you invite people to go do right after this? As they prepare for the next lesson or as they think about what they're going to do, what would you have them go do?
Oh, man, there's the question. It might look like this. It might look like who's ever teaching really getting on their knees and thinking about the class that they've been given a stewardship for and getting really clear with God, what would I honestly hope happens with that group of people? And then to start measuring that against, okay, if that's what I want for them, how do I get there? And then to just start to marry those two ideas a little bit to say, my heart changes when I get to do this, when I get to share, when I get to talk, when people tell their stories with me, when I get asked really good questions that make me think. I don't know, the more I can think about what would I want them to experience versus how does that work in my own conversion? And now if I can just marry those a little bit and say, okay, now that I can see that vision, I'm going to go try something that I've never tried in class. I'm going to try something new. I'm going to flip the order backwards and we're just going to start with their questions, or I'm going to invite somebody in, or I'm going to invite, I don't know, I'm going to send a text out to them and I'm going to get them to think about this one quote. And we're just going to start with, I'm just going to do one thing that I haven't done before, not just for the sake of doing something different. I'm going to do one thing that I haven't done before after I got the vision of what I want to have happen to them. And I've thought about how it's happened to me in my own life. That would be a good starting place.
That's great.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I think you very succinctly kind of summarized a lot of what we talked about. That's fantastic. What a great articulate
I hope it didn't feel like rambling, because I rambled.
No, not at all. No,
not at all.
Well, I've learned a ton about. I'm excited to go blow some things up and get my hands slapped on them.
Man.
Welcome to my world. Welcome to my world.
I love it. Well, thank you, Ryan. This has been fabulous. I'm very excited for many people to listen and to watch and to get their own ideas and their own inspiration of what they need to go do and how to do it. And thanks for sharing your experiences and your failures with us.
Thanks for letting me share both.
We appreciate it. Thanks, everyone, for listening. And if you would, share this with others who need to blow things up. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Teaching Restored. Now, we want you to know that there's more than just this podcast, more than just the discussions that Julie and I have with each other or with other guests that come in. There's a lot more. Let me give you a few things that where we just expand this reach. Number one, there's a community where you can go online and learn from a lot of others and even give ideas yourself. And that is found if you go to leadingsaints.org or teachingrestored.com and look at the community link there. That'll take you to a whole community. And we are a part of the Leading Saints community there, where we talk about, among other things, how to be better gospel teachers. So I would highly recommend you go there. We have some incredible discussions, some real passionate discussions of ideas and different things that we can do to be better gospel teachers. And also we have all of our socials. If you haven't been there, go connect up. We bring in other people's posts that you may not have seen that have great ideas, snippets from General Conference, and just ideas that don't take an hour podcast. They're a lot shorter that we just want to throw out of some good ideas. And then if you would, of course, please pay it forward. Share it with other gospel teachers. That way we can all become more converted, more gospel-centered, and just better teachers of the gospel of Jesus Christ overall. Thanks for joining us in this journey. The team here at Teaching Restored, we so appreciate it. And we love what we do. And this has been a wonderful journey for us. And we're excited about where this is still going. We have more plans to expand the content and expand things out for you. So stay tuned and we'll see you around. Thanks for joining us.